Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special edition of Sir Hunt on X in prime time. It is prime time season for me because I have, as I said before, gotten the promotion and now I'm onto the day shift. My show has hit the prime time circuit live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Hope everyone out there had themselves a wonderful November 12th of the calendar year 2024. Ever had themselves a wonderful day today? Actually, a little chilly here in Cincinnati. It was in the high 40s for the most part. Felt like wintry out there, but that's how the weather is. Of course, it's winter this time of year. Hope everyone out there is having themselves a wonderful day, wherever you may be at. Gonna relive actually a Cincinnati moment or a Cincinnati icon here in a little bit. Brief touch on the NFL aspect of it. Earlier today, last night it was Miami over the Rams. Sort of a brutal loss for the Rams to try to keep their playoff hopes alive. I mean, these are the kind of games you cannot afford to lose if you're trying to uh, fight for a playoff spot. Miami really not going anywhere. I mean, they got Tua Tagovailoa back. They basically would have to win out and get help all over the place, but that's not happening. Might as well just do what you can. Tagovailoa had a good game, but not a great game. Matthew Stafford didn't have all that great of a game either. Not necessarily the most well played game, but kudos to Miami for getting the job done. It was a good road win. Maybe they're still in it, maybe they're not. Who knows? Yeah, of course, early in game two, it took a hard hit coming off the concussion protocol, which is something you don't want to see. But overall, it's a good win for Miami. Let's see where they go from here. Bad loss for the Rams because they were hoping to at least compete with the 49ers and even the Arizona Cardinals for the first place in the NFC West. But what can you say? It's a bad loss for the Rams. Maybe they get a wild card spot. Who knows? But Matthew Stafford didn't play all that great. The game was just a bit dull. You know what I mean? So that is what it is. Good one for Miami. Shout out to my Dolphins followers for a happy victory Tuesday. Uh, Solid win. Uh, I get asked all the time about, especially the boxing community, about some of the great Cincinnati fighters. The top one, of course, is still Ezra Charles. I mean, I elaborate about him several times. What he did, the just trilogy with Jersey Joe Walcott. Of course, the win over Joe Louis. Beat Archie Moore 3 times at light heavyweight. Arguably the greatest light heavyweight of all time. But right behind him, probably had his landmark moment 42 years ago, albeit with some controversy, but I'll get to here in a bit. It's the Hawk Aaron Pryor when he fought the late Alexis Arguello at the Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. Alexis Arguello and Aaron Pryor. In the boxing community, I've always been asked, who are some of the more you would call beautiful fighters you think has ever laced up the gloves? Maybe for that time, no two were more beauty and more fun to watch than Aaron Pryor and Alexis Arguello. A case of polar opposites. Arguello, the multi-division world champion, may arguably the second greatest Latino fighter of all time behind the great Roberto Duran. I mean, guys in the conversation before, if I put my Latino list all time, Arguello is number 2 behind Roberto. Aaron Pryor was looking for his coming out party. He beat Antonio Cervantes to win the title here at Riverfront Stadium way back when. Packed the house here in Cincinnati. Made some successful title defenses, but was looking for his coming out party. You guys know the story with him. He tried to get a fight with Sugar Ray Leonard several times. One time he was offered $750,000. He turned it down. Second time he was offered $1 million. He turned it down. And then finally made some kind of mutual agreement for him to sign the contract. That's when the detachment happened with Ray Leonard. So he never got the fight he wanted. But we coined the phrase super fight too much, especially these days. We haven't seen a fight that you legitimately call a super fight. Maybe a super build-up, but not a super fight. This fight was both a super fight and a super build-up in more ways than one. I mean, Alexis Arguello is looking to become the first ever fighter to win the world titles in 4 weight classes. Got not too long ago, got the big win over Ray Boom Boom Mancini. Beat Alfredo Escalera twice. Beat Jose a tough pro, and Jose Luis Ramirez, whose place in history is second to none himself. Uh, One of the more, if you want to call this, gentleman fighters carried himself as a class act out of the ring, which is something you don't say much about boxers. A ring technician who was very, very deceptive, very, very thin, almost built like a toothpick. But when he threw, he landed, and when he landed, he did damage. Maybe one of the premier ultra little big men, maybe ever. I mean, the record speaks for itself. If we've one won over 80 fights, 3 world titles, the greatest fighter come out of Nicaragua. We talk about the Latino countries. As I said, second to Roberto Duran. Aaron Pryor from right here in Cincinnati was looking for his moment. He tried to get. They said he tried to get the Leonard fight, never got it. So he pursues this fight. The strange thing about this fight was everything was fixated on Alexis Arguello by the media, the ring announcers, HBO, and everybody. But Aaron Pryor felt like he was slighted because of it, because all the attention fell to Alexis Arguello. Understandably so, because Arguello had the charming personality, he had the history that backed it up, the legacy, everything. Coming off the win actually last year over Ray Mancini, where he just systematically broke down and destroyed him. Coming into this fight, the betting money was both ways. I think last minute went to Pryor because he was a naturally bigger guy. Um, One of the weirdest things that happened was Aaron Pryor as the champion, because it was for his junior welterweight title, was introduced first, which never happens when you talk about uh, ring introductions. He was introduced first as the champion, which is something that never happens. And basically, they called Mr. Alexis Arguello Mr. Alexis Arguello as a way to throw it in Aaron Pryor's face. Just add a fuel to the fire. Fight started. The fight started out with looking like Aaron Pryor was going to basically overwhelm Alexis Arguello. I mean, ferocious exchanges both ways. But as the fight wore on, Alexis Arguello, who's notoriously a slow starter, would find ways to get his momentum going and would find ways to sharpshoot and hit and do damage to Aaron Pryor. I mean, every time Aaron Pryor pinned him against the ropes, you would see Alexis Arguello fire back. Great exchanges both ways. A great firefight both ways that basically had the house lit up in Miami, Florida. As fight were on, Arguello started to really take over, started to build a lead on the scorecards. From the middle rounds on, Pryor had his moments. He would come back. He was starting to come on. Arguello comes back. The back and forth between these two fighters in 1982 at Miami, Florida was absolutely phenomenal and sensational. I mean, one of those rare fights where you can say it had high billing and surpassed the hype. I mean, basically, it raised the bar. We talk about championship level fights in those weight classes for that era. When Pryor was going to win, had Arguello hurt. Times where Arguello came back. Actually, a combination at the end of round 10 was an uppercut and 2 overhand rights. Pryor tried to laugh at him as he was going to the corner. But as you all say in boxing, when you smile at him, that pretty much means he got caught with a good shot. Um, Now we're going to fast forward to the really what's talked about this fight, the unfortunate part, which was between rounds 13 and 14. In between rounds, the trainer Panama Lewis instructed a second quarter man to give him the bottle, the one I mixed, and basically he got to drink Aaron Pryor drink the bottle, whatever the containment was in that uh, um, bottle or whatever fluid it was. Aaron Pryor drank that bottle, and basically out of nowhere in the 14th round, just put together a vicious combination with a burst of energy out of nowhere, and basically pinned Arguello against the ropes. Arguello was defenseless. The fight was essentially stopped. Aaron Pryor retains his junior welterweight title. It would turn out to be one of the real classic fights of that era. But of course, the story here was what happened after the fight, unfortunately, because it just dampened what took place during the fight, which was an epic classic. What was revealed after the fight, because this is a big picture premise that took place maybe for down the line, because for something bigger that happened a year later. What took place here was the Miami, the local Florida commission, excuse me. What took place was a local Florida commission didn't even bother to look at or take this bottle that had the mixed ingredient in it that Panama Lewis and his cornerman had, which was provided to Aaron Pryor before the 14th round. They didn't do any random drug tests, and Panama Lewis was let off the hook. The outcry of all of this was basically, you know, the perception, at least perception-wise, was Pryor won because of the tainted bottle. Aaron Pryor for decades defended his stance, basically saying, you know, I was the better man that night, regardless of the bottle. Of course, respected punters like Sugar Ray Leonard and Gil Clancy basically said he didn't need the bottle, which really he didn't, because I thought he might have still would have been able to win the fight on a close decision. But the bottle created so much controversy to where basically there was outrage here. What should have been done. The fact that nobody even bothered to do post fight drug screening, and there's still questions 3 decades later about what's in that bottle, basically just speaks to the unfortunate circumstance for Aaron Pryor, because it basically just dampens was probably his finest moment, because this was supposed to be his coming out party where the road was introduced to an all-time great, especially a Cincinnati icon, which I'll get to his stat here later. The biggest thing out of this was, because of everything that happened with this, the key component was Panama Lewis again let off the hook. And for my fight followers, you know what happened a year later. He was allowed to be in the corner of Louis Resto against Billy Collins. For those of you guys that follow me on X, I shared my article from We Like Sports and my live from this past summer about that particular fight and documentary. You're welcome to check it out. The biggest misfortune here was there was a chance to basically set a standard, and the Florida Commission dropped the ball, unfortunately, simply because a lot of things, a lot of happenings in the business of boxing for the next 2 to 3 years would have changed a lot of platforms had the Florida Commission done their job. But for the fight itself, the push for a rematch, which took place a little more than a year later, Aaron Pryor just basically was just too much at that point. Arguello's body just gave out on him by his own admission. Pryor wins on a 10th round TKO. But after the fight, those fights, they became good friends despite everything that happened. But the biggest misfortune still, I know this was brought up in the Assault in the Ring documentary by Louis Resto, who was trained by Panama Lewis. So what was in the bottles? Still a mystery almost 4 decades later. I mean, nobody knows what's in it. They say it was peppermint schnapps. Louis Resto said it was some kind of asthma pill that was crushed that you can splurge energy out of. The thing is, there was something in that bottle. I mean, it was common sense. Something was in that bottle. But did he really need the bottle to beat Alexis Arguello? Because Aaron Parker probably was one of the last few rounds that just won the fight. I mean, unless there was something going on, which, everybody knows how crummy of a human being Panama Lewis was. Needless to say, it's still the hot topic for this day. But when you get two iconic fighters two elite all-time greats that went at it the way Aaron Pryor and Alexis Arguello did in those two fights, you're going to get a thing of beauty because they both were phenomenal fighters to watch, beautiful fighters to watch. Aaron Pryor's place in boxing history, you could legitimately argue Pryor's the greatest junior welterweight of all time. Some guys may have a case for that. Julio Cesar Chavez, Costa Zoo, just to name a few. But if you hold me to it, the Hawk, the Cincinnati Hawk, Aaron Pryor, is the greatest junior welterweight of all time. The way he won the title from Antonio Cervantes is a must watch. I mean, it looked like Cervantes had the fight won. Pryor just comes up the canvas out of nowhere and just obliterates Cervantes as if him being knocked down never happened. I mean, that's just how lethal Aaron Pryor was. His ability to put power punches in combination together the way he did was second to none. All these mythical matchups at 140, I'd probably pick him over anyone because he's the one that stands out. He could never get the fight with Ray Leonard for many reasons. He did beat Thomas Hearns in the amateurs. Albeit there's some funkiness from if you listen to the Tommy Hearns point of view, but it doesn't deter the fact that Aaron Pryor was a terrific all-time great super lightweight, junior welterweight, whatever you want to name it. His place here in Cincinnati, because I get asked this a lot when I talk about some of my Cincinnati from my overseas followers I talk sports with. Some of the greatest athletes, I make sure this guy's name is always mentioned. You know, the Big O, Oscar Robertson's the one that stands out, bar none. Probably the greatest basketball player to ever come out of Cincinnati, easily. I always mentioned Ezra Charles, his legacy. Of course, there's of Aaron Pryor. From the Big Red Machine, the standouts: Johnny Bench, the greatest catcher ever; Joe Morgan, one of the greatest shortstops ever. Down the line, Barry Larkin, the left tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals, the great Anthony Munoz, and his quarterback Ken Anderson. And the most recent one, Luciano Lucho Acosta of the Soccer FC Cincinnati. Aaron Pryor is on that list. Of course, after the fight, it was well chronicled that Aaron Pryor's drug problems, was treated for drug dependency numerous times. Had a couple of fights where it didn't look too good. Fought a fighter named Bobby Joe Young, where a small punch to the back of the head just put him down and out for the count. But after the fight, he basically retired for good. In and out of rehabs. Apparently picked up off the streets over the Rhine in Cincinnati. Had to serve time for a some kind of drug trafficking, drug possession charge. I don't remember what it was. Had to serve several years at Pickaway Center in somewhere in Ohio. But the best thing, maybe his biggest victory wasn't beating Alexis Arguello or beating Antonio Cervantes, is when he got out of jail, he stayed clean till the time he left this earth in 2016. Was a spokesperson for those who are trying to battle addiction here in Cincinnati. Actually had some kind of recovery center somewhere. Maybe some of my Cincinnati followers can tell me this. Somewhere in Cincinnati, they had a drug recovery center named after him. He used religion, found God, became a model citizen afterwards. And when he passed away in 2016, the world, the city of Cincinnati was so silent. I could hear a pin drop from where I live at to where Cincinnati is, and I live 30 minutes from the city. That's how silent it was when Aaron Pryor passed away. That's Aaron Pryor's, overall legacy in Cincinnati and in boxing. For Alexis Arguello, chance to make history, he failed. He lost this fight. Had a couple fights, lost a Pryor rematch. Got a fight against Billy Costello, came back, got a win, but didn't want to pursue his career at that point. Got some ridiculous offer in 1995 to fight Scott Walker, where basically he was overwhelmed and he basically had no business being in the ring at that point. But like Aaron Pryor, he himself went into drug dependency, had all kinds of issues unfortunate issues with depression and, took his own life. I think it was like 2000. I'm trying to think what year it was. Can't remember. It was some point in the early 2010s. Somebody can help me out with this one. But it happened around the same time, Arturo Gatti was murdered in Brazil, within that range. Uh, One of the finer gentlemen the sport had ever seen, Alexis Arguello. Maybe we talk about the beauty of the sport, the way to deliver a punch, the way to fight in a the broader sense of the elegance of beauty of our sport. For his time, nobody did like Alexis Arguello. The resume speaks for itself. Beat three division world champion, beat Alfredo Escalera twice, beat Ray Mancini, beat Jose Luis Ramirez, knocked out Kevin Rooney on a punch that basically Kevin Rooney's still seeing stars. But Alexis Arguello, with his accomplishments, what he's done throughout his career, arguably the greatest Latino fighter, not named Roberto Duran. Other guys in the conversation, Salvador Sanchez might have challenged it, had not for his tragedy. Julio Cesar Chavez, Felix Trinidad, Wilfredo Benitez, Wilfredo Gomez. I guess Lupe Pintor, just to name. I'm just wrapping up names right now. Some others in there. I can go back to a guy like Carlos Ortiz and Kid Gavilan. But Alexis Arguello, his body of work, his style, whatever he did in the ring, man amongst boys. Again, not necessarily the sharpest tool, not necessarily the imposing figure. Didn't look like a fighter because he always carried himself as a class act and a true gentleman out of the ring. Of course, at one point he went to war for his native homeland Nicaragua, which was just a catastrophic mess at the time. I'm not even going to venture that field; it's too much to talk about. But his place in boxing history is also secure. And it was on this night 42 years ago. The beauty of these two all-time greats, Aaron Pryor and Alexis Arguello, and one of those rare fights you can legitimately call a super fight. It became a super fight through all the controversy, through all the action, through everything you want to call it. Lit up Miami, Florida. It's been a long time since Miami, Florida been lit up like that. These two warriors were just simply were second to none and gave us an epic classic 42 years ago today. The things I miss in this sport. Boy, I wish I could turn back the clock at my age and cover that fight. It would have been a doozy. If we had all of this on the internet, social media, whatever. Once again, for you, morons in the fight community who love belts, this was not for a belt. This was the legit lineal super lightweight championship. Aaron Pryor basically validated that when he beat Alexis Arguello on this day. Probably you can asterisk it all you want. I mean, legitimate claim because nobody still knows what was in that body. But Aaron Pryor stood up as man among boys and stood out as probably the greatest junior welterweight of all time, sealed it with this victory. Now, of course, another one I'd like to touch on a little bit. Another ones I just briefly touch about this. This is the another place in history you're going to talk about. This is the Pacquiao Marquez, Manny Pacquiao won Manuel Marquez 4-fight series. Not much to touch about with this because it was just when you say Juan Manuel Marquez, Manny Pacquiao, what can you say? They made their mark in history. Juan Manuel Marquez, at a time when Julio Cesar Chavez hit his decline, 3 Mexican guys stood out: Morales, Barrera, Marquez. Marquez eventually beat Barrera. Morales wanted nothing to do with him. He gets to 4 fights with Pacquiao. You could argue the first fight I thought it was a draw, legitimately scored a draw. Can go either way. Second fight, I thought Marquez eked it out. Again, could go either way. I thought Marquez was robbed the third time, which just happened 13 years ago today. And of course, the capper was the punch that Manny Pacquiao, "Are you okay, Manny? Are you okay? Are you okay, Manny? Are you okay, Manny Pacquiao? Because you got what you deserved that day." Him and his fans got what they deserved when Manuel Marquez loaded up with the right hand and put him face first on the canvas, and that was all she wrote. Terrific four-fight series. I don't elaborate much on this because not much to elaborate on because when you mention Pacquiao Marquez, it's all over the place. Maybe the greatest modern four-fight series ever. I mean, you had Israel Vasquez and Rafael Marquez, same sort of thing. But in terms of high skill level that Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez put in those four fights, because you're talking about two of the four best fighters in the world when they went at it in the pound for pound rankings, two of the top four. They gave us four excellent fights, just like Pryor-Arguello did in '82 with their two fights. These two gave it to us for four fights. What can you say? And Juan Manuel Marquez, I said this all along. This was probably the biggest victory for a Mexican fighter since Julio Cesar Chavez come from behind knockout on Melvin Taylor. Say what you want about that. You can't defeat the official result. I mean, even greater than Antonio Margarito knocking out Miguel Cotto because everybody knows what happened to what Antonio Margarito tried to do to Shane Mosley 5 months later. Let's get that out of the way. Don't even mention Antonio Margarito ever again because for the obvious reasons. I'm going to rewind back to Pryor-Arguello because I'm going to touch on one more subject because I meant to talk about this. Because the commission blunt dropped the ball, the world got the chance to see what Panama Lewis was made of a year later. As I mentioned, he was in the corner of Luis Bresso for his fight with Billy Collins. I'm sure everybody knows the story. In the locker room, the gloves, cut the hole in the gloves, pulls the horse padding out. Bresso uses the padding of the gloves, the plaster of Paris on the wrap hands, and the spike fluids to push Resto to beat Billy Collins to please a drug trafficker, largely because, money was weaker. Of course, weeks later, Panama Lewis was thrown out of the sport. The Resto victory over Collins was overturned to a no contest. And if you watch the documentary, Panama Lewis plays the victim in a narcissistic way in one of the most despicable acts maybe ever. The Florida Commission dropped the ball when it came to that fluid bottle in the corner of Aaron Pryor because it was Panama Lewis, as everybody knows, the guilty culprit of it. The sad part for Aaron Pryor and Alexis Arguello, everyone's going to talk about the bottle and Panama Lewis. That's who Panama Lewis was at the end of the day. He's 6 feet under, hopefully burning in the flames of hell. Because he broke a lot of people. He broke a lot of people and broke them bad. I never gave him the time of day for the boxing community just simply because of his actions. Some people do have it. I'm not. I'm glad I never got to met that guy because I have no desire to. And so on this night, I will wrap up this version of Sir Hunt on X. And I was promised was going to be the English followers today. Actually, it's tomorrow because my dates got all mixed up. Tomorrow, I'll be back to my normal time. It'll be via satellite, so my followers overseas can be up and watch it. Because tomorrow, it's a 25-year anniversary of probably the greatest fighter in British history who got his revenge and his redemption in more ways than one. I think everybody knows where I'm about to go. You guys already know I'm about to go with this. I'm going to devote a whole hour to it because this guy deserved his moment in the sun. He fought so hard for it. I'm going to give it to him. Hope everyone out there has themselves a wonderful night. I will see you guys tomorrow. Until then, take care of yourselves. God bless. Make self-care a priority because if you don't make self-care a priority, you're not going to be able to take care of yourself. Take care. Good night, and God bless.